see blue velvet. Hey, neighbor. Here I come. You got about 1 second to live, buddy.
Hey guys, I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
And this is Movie Matters. Today we talk about the divisive film Blue Velvet from David Lynch from 1986. It's both of our first time viewing it, and man, was it something?
That's putting it mildly, Kevin.
Yeah, Did you just watch it today?
I watched it yesterday.
Okay. So did I. I mean, we've had time to digest it a little bit. Has it gotten better for you or worse for you? We talked about this in our last review on After Hours, where it takes a bit to digest, and you either like it more or you don't. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
So I mean, it is a very heavy and shocking movie. I liked it a lot, and I like it more now that I've let it digest a bit.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I don't know. We'll get into a lot of it, but this movie relies heavily on symbolism and kind of really stark moral contrast, and once you get past some of the initial shock factor, it becomes much more palatable. That's to say, I don't know if I'll ever watch it again, but it was still a pretty good movie.
Have you seen any of his other movies?
So the only other thing I've seen from him is Twin Peaks, the show.
Okay, and what's your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I love Twin Peaks.
Huh.
And it uses a lot of the same types of surrealist storytelling that this movie does. And from what I've been reading yesterday and today, Blue Velvet is kind of his watershed moment where he comes up with all of these crazy techniques and recurring motifs that he carries through all the rest of his movies, basically. And the influence of Blue Velvet is extremely present all throughout Twin Peaks. So it's pretty interesting to watch the movie after watching the show a long time ago, and picking up on all the different things that he carried through.
Yeah, this movie apparently inspired Twin Peaks. Like you said, it was kind of his jumping off point. I've seen Mulholland Drive, which is very weird. Again, kind of hypersexual, like this movie. I expected this movie to be even more deranged and violent and sexual, which is kind of weird because it's still a lot. I don't know. I always go on IMDb and I see the rating, and it'll say profanity severe, violence severe, sex severe. And when it says severe, I'm expecting it to be pretty fucking awful.
Yeah.
Pretty bad, pretty gratuitous, content matter. And I saw that on this movie, of course, and I expected it to be more, as bad as that sounds.
Yeah, the movie's really interesting, and I would categorize it that way, as severe in nearly every category. But it's all very real, in his use of sex, violence, profanity, and whatever else. It's not like Commando where he's just mowing people down at a distance and there's over the top gore and things like that. A lot of the violence in this movie is violence against women and somewhat sexual in nature, which is I think, more disturbing than watching Arnold like mow down 50 people in
Yeah.
one shot. So
Yeah,
it's
good contrast there. This is definitely a different '80s movie, folks.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a thinker as well.
Yep.
So I kept reading that this movie is considered a comedy. Have you read that?
I
Heard
do
that?
not feel that way in like any way, shape, or form. I mean, I know like there's always like an element of like twisted humor in Lynch's work.
Yeah.
And it's just like I feel like you only really get there if you've watched the movie like 3 or 4 times.
I can see that.
Like,
that's a good point.
There's like some parts that are just kind of like, well, so he uses like absurdity a lot of the times to spark the kind of like slightly humorous moments. Like, but my wife watched the movie with me, and we both started cracking up when the lady climbs up onto the car and starts dancing.
Yes.
To In Dreams.
Yeah.
While Frank's like berating and beating the shit out of Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like it's like so strange and like absurd, and like it adds to like the surrealist elements that Lynch is known for.
Yeah.
Same with like the guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's lip syncing.
Yeah, Dean
In
Stockwell.
Dreams. Yes, Dean Stockwell.
That's his actor, his real name.
The actor, yeah.
Who we know from Paris, Texas, and he's the lawyer in To Live and Die in L.A. to tie back into our '80s, recurring characters and recurring actors, which I love. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Lynch is, like, I think one of the hallmarks of his movies are scenes that kind of pull you out of the action in, like, a very strange, like, vignette of, like, some weird situation. Then he pushes you right back in. And, like, I feel like that helps kind of break some of the tension that he builds up, but also, like, he doesn't give you much reprieve because he like slams you with it like a freight train right after that little scene ends. Like, so it's almost like like the giant drop like rides. Like it's kind of like that. But not just the ones that go down, the ones that shoot you back up too.
Yeah,
like that's kind of what his movies are like.
That's a good comparison as well. It's funny. Yeah, I didn't think this movie was that funny, but like you said, I think with subsequent viewings, which we may not do, it gets funnier. But like, I read that, and this is really kind of twisted, and I guess this is just David Lynch's take on it, I guess, or humor, is during the like rape scene where Frank is raping Dorothy, which didn't even really like seem realistic to me personally. Like I feel like he didn't even pull his pants down, and like he like did it for like 2 seconds. I mean, I'm not obviously de-escalating the situation for that, but apparently David Lynch was laughing during the whole thing while he was filming it. Pretty interesting. But
yeah, I mean, it's like, if you like, there's just so much shock factor,
absurdity
to everything, and like so much of particularly Frank's character is just like totally unhinged, like psychopathy.
Yeah,
like like
he is awesome in this movie, like acting wise.
Yeah,
Dennis Hopper.
Yeah,
he's
Dennis
so good.
Hopper is really, really good. And like it's like, yeah, everything is almost, well, particularly his acting is very like caricature-esque in a lot of ways, of like almost like a supervillain in like a lot of ways. So yeah, I mean, like, Yeah, I don't know. It must just be Lynch's sense of humor, but like it's very, very disturbing.
Very.
And like, I don't know. There's some of I described some of the moments that like made me laugh. But most of the other ones, I don't think I could ever get to the point where I'd be laughing during them. You know, like
yikes.
Yeah.
Have you seen the movie Speed with Keanu Reeves?
Keanu? Yeah.
Okay, so Dennis Hopper's the bad guy in that movie, and there's a part where he thinks they're like infiltrating the I think it's in the beginning. They're infiltrating the elevator to save all the people. And Dennis Hopper goes, "Don't fuck with Daddy," and blows like the elevator shaft or whatever. The like cords and stuff. And I just the whole time I'm watching this movie, I kept thinking of that line because he's just Daddy and Mommy is a very kind of recurring theme in this movie.
For him in particular.
For him, yeah. But also for Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And I watched some YouTube videos on this. This is definitely a movie you dissect, and everyone's got their 2 cents of it. But there was an interesting take that I saw online that was like it's very Freudian, and how like basically, in the beginning his dad has a stroke while he's like watering his garden, and he Jeffrey's a college student, and he's basically still a boy, but coming back to his small town, he becomes a man because he's now like the patriarch of the family, because his dad is an invalid now, unfortunately, having had a stroke. And so I've read that like now he thinks like Dorothy's his mother and Frank is his father, and like it's just there's a lot of Freudian like twists and stuff, like you want to have sex with your mother, which is fucked up, by the way. A very weird take, but that's like
a little bit of projection on Freud's part, I think, but
yeah. So yeah, some weird stuff, but I really like. I mean, the whole opening of this movie is awesome in my opinion, because it's like, for one, you don't know what time period this movie is set in at all, which is really cool, and I love when movies do that.
I was trying to look at the cars.
Yes.
It's not really...
It doesn't help.
Make it any better. Yeah.
No, because in the beginning you have this fire truck, this like late 1940s fire truck going by in this town. You have all the like a late 70s Oldsmobile Delta that he drives, that Jeffrey drives. You've got this like when the ambulance comes to take Dorothy away later in the movie, it's like an old 70s Cadillac.
Yeah, it's like the hearse Cadillac, but it's an ambulance. But yeah,
and then Frank's car is like a 68 Charger.
Yeah.
So it's like you don't know what time period this takes place, which is cool. But again, the beginning is really cool, and I love. I figured this out literally while I was making my notes for this, which I thought was super cool. Is the dad has the stroke and he hits the ground, and it's like this beautiful suburban town. It looks perfect. It's like everyone knows this town. Everyone's seen this idyllic town. Everyone's friendly. Everyone waves. You've got the Dalmatian on the fire truck. You have him fall, and then the camera kind of goes into the grass, and it shows all these nasty insects, like thousands of them, which is super gross.
Just like squirming on top of each other. And
yeah. And so what that represents is you have this idyllic town above, but there's always this seedy, gross underbelly, this criminal underbelly in this town. And I thought that was such a cool way to do it. And there's, not to get ahead of myself, but at the end, you've got this theme with the robins as well. The robins represent love. And, Sandy, Laura Dern's character, talks about how, she had this dream and all these robins finally come out because there was no birds, and that symbolizes love. And at the end, you have this robin with an insect in its mouth. Which is super interesting. It's like, cool. There's love in this scenario, and it's kind of killed this one little tiny insect of crime in this town. but there's still always something that lurks underneath. And, like, I love that. That made me like the movie even more.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the ending because this is basically a like neo-noir movie, and like for those that don't know, like film noir was really big in like the 40s and 50s. It's basically like detective stories. This movie carries a lot of the hallmarks of noir filmmaking. There's a femme fatale who is Dorothy. There's like a major villain who is Frank. And then the like kind of like misguided or like uncertain hero. A lot of times where like the main character in a lot of film noir is usually flawed in some big way and has some kind of like moral ambiguity or something like that they either overcome or they get killed like trying to overcome it, which the main character dying is like a hallmark of film noir, in like the time period when it was most common. But yeah, I mean, I actually really appreciate that this movie ends on a happy note. Because I feel like if it had ended with Jeffrey's death or, Frank or his crew getting away, or like, the whole town turns out to be in on this corrupt, enterprise like type of scenario, like I feel like the movie just wouldn't sit well. I think all the like disturbing content becomes tolerable because it's tied up in this like happy ending where everyone kind of gets to go back to their idyllic suburbia, and you can kind of walk away feeling somewhat good at the end. I think without that, I think it would be pretty unwatchable.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Yeah, it would definitely make me dislike the movie for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, like you said. That's definitely a contrast to film noir having a happy ending. And it almost feels like too good to be true. That ending.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's part of the surrealist nature of the movie is
definitely.
that it's a it isn't meant to be real.
Yeah.
And like one of the things that early on in the movie, my wife was like, why is Jeffrey so like interested in digging into this? Like, why wouldn't he just like when he initially finds the ear, he like picks it up and puts it in a bag, and she's like, why is he doing that?
Yeah, it's weird.
And like, it's because it's not supposed to be realistic. It's supposed to be odd. It's supposed to be strange. It's supposed to invoke weird emotions in you. And like, so a lot of characters do things that are totally out of like logic and sense.
And do you think that's why his actors, like I feel like the secondary characters all act very strangely. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've noticed that in this, like the detective, Sandy's father, when Jeffrey shows the ear to him, he's like, yeah, that's a human ear, all right. Mm-hmm. Just like very monotone, like not freaking out, just very like monotone almost. It's very strange.
Right.
Like even there's a shot of Jeffrey walking at night, and there's this bigger guy in sunglasses walking his tiny dog, just like staring
it's in
at
the
him.
Middle of the night.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's just like so bizarre. Mm-hmm. It's weird.
Yeah, and there's like random shots of trees looking up as Jeffrey walks, and there's nothing in the trees. There's nothing like going on. he just injects these like quick shots,
like almost POV.
yeah, which is also like it's not anything like. It's like the trees aren't disturbing, but the fact that he's just throwing it in there puts you off a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, is someone going to be in the tree? Like, you know, you're like waiting for something to happen. And it's just like, you know, it's weird.
Whole movie's weird.
Now that I'm actually talking that through, I think what it's really showing you is that there's no birds in the town.
Oh, shit.
Whoa! Because that's the like you said, the big motif of the movie is this dream that Sandy has of thousands of robins coming and like bringing light back into the town.
Damn.
Yeah,
make me change my rating.
Yeah, I mean and that's like what we're talking about. Like this movie's really pretty deep, and like there's a lot to unpack. For sure. This
definitely wasn't going to be 12 minutes. We'll see how long it goes. I've got a decent amount to talk about for sure. Man, that's a pretty awesome realization. I had no idea. That's pretty cool.
That literally just occurred to me. I was like, oh shit, like, there are no birds at all in the movie.
Yeah.
Until the end. Not even bird noises in the movie until the very end.
Ironically, the very end, that bird is a dead bird that they like puppeteered.
Yeah,
which is fucking weird and fucked up. Speaking of birds, too, what a strange like scene when Jeffrey's walking with Sandy, and he's like, "You ever heard of the chicken walk?" And then he just starts walking like a chicken, just out of the blue.
Yeah.
It's just, his dialogue is so bizarre. It's just, you kind of mentioned it in After Hours, just like fever dream. This movie's like a fever dream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like it's a hallmark in Twin Peaks as well, that like characters will be having very mundane conversations, and some like really random piece of dialogue will be like shoehorned into a conversation and then almost completely neglected like in the next few sentences. And like another big hallmark that you see the beginnings of in this movie, but he really like flushes out, in my opinion, extremely well in Twin Peaks, is the like over exaggerated soap opera style acting. That like really adds to that like surrealist element where like everyone overreacts to everything, and it like creates like a very strange tension like throughout the entire movie. This in Blue Velvet, the main people that act this way are Frank and I said her name earlier. Dorothy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was like, I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's Dorothy because it's the Wizard of Oz, but I couldn't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that ties into our last movie, After Hours, with the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah. But yeah, Frank and Dorothy have very like polarized kind of characters where like Frank is extremely aggressive and angry, and Dorothy's kind of like generally like in a state of like malaise, and like she almost like moves like fluidly and like kind of like rambling and stuff, and like she doesn't talk particularly like she's kind of like a like, I don't know, if she was water, Frank would be fire. Frank is like very deliberate in all of his actions and very like strong and like lots of like jarring kind of movements and stuff that aren't very like fluid. They're very like haphazard, but like and chaotic, I guess is the best way to describe him.
Definitely. I mean, him breathing in the heat, having the like oxygen tank, and breathing in the like oxygen to get him high to like heighten his sexual like physicalities is pretty crazy. And apparently he was supposed to breathe in helium originally. I basically almost said it right when I was saying what he was breathing in.
Yeah.
And that was in the original script, is that he would breathe in helium, but Dennis Hopper suggested it be changed to amyl nitrate, which he knew would enhance sexual experiences, which, like, how does he know that? Come on. But, like, Hopper only realized years later, how bizarre and therefore fitting the concept of helium breathing maniac talking in a high voice would have been. Like, imagine that, him doing helium. It also would have been pretty comical, but like that would have been so crazy. But like people, even Lynch, David Lynch was like, yeah, like helium would make people laugh, and he's like, I don't want to do it for this particular scene. But Dennis Hopper, he's the one that like says, he's the only one besides Dean Stockwell's character Ben that says fuck in the entire movie.
Yeah.
And he says it like in nearly every single sentence, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
And apparently David Lynch would never say the word fuck. He would, like, during filming, he would simply point to the line in the script and say that word or that word. Hopper laughed about it, saying, like, he can write it, but he won't say it. He's a pretty interesting man. And Lynch has said that that's not exactly true, but he didn't want to, like, charge the atmosphere any more than it already was. So he didn't want to add to the chaoticness.
Yeah, well, like, it because Hopper's the only one that uses it, I feel like it makes it more powerful, even though he uses it indiscriminately. He's like the only one with like the power to like use that word, which is a pretty interesting like concept.
Yeah, like he's the only adult almost in the entire thing, which is pretty wild. Or like, it's interesting. Several actors were considered for the role of Frank, but whenever they like read the script, they found the character just too intense and like they're just like despicable, like they don't want to play him. But however, Dennis Hopper read the script and was like, I've got to play Frank because I am Frank. Which is wild. I'm sure Dennis Hopper was a pretty wild guy in real life. I mean, he was a pioneer in cinema. I mean, he did Easy Rider, and he's been in a ton of crazy movies, and I'm sure he did a ton of drugs. And he was just wild. I loved when he was in 24, show 24.
Who is he playing 24?
He was a bad guy in like season 3, I think.
Oh, huh.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I remember he was a bad guy, and he was pretty awesome.
Interesting.
He always plays a really good bad guy.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much in the Super Mario Brothers movie, when that came out in like the 90s, I think.
The live action one?
Yeah. Even though, people say that movie's horrible, I don't mind it so much. I mean, there's apparently like even like not to keep going back to it, but like the ritualistic rape scene, which is terrible, but Isabella Rossellini, who plays Dorothy, was actually really naked under her robe, her velvet robe, when most people, like most actors, will put pads or like socks or like pasties and stuff on. She was apparently like really like actually naked, and Dennis Hopper wasn't really aware of this until the cameras started rolling. So like he just was like shocked before like from this, and he's like, this is like literally, that was the first scene that was shot where they worked together. So that was a way to get them to bond, I guess.
Yeah. Well, That's the first time he shows up in the movie too.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, because I think he calls, but that's about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, apparently the movie was like 4 hours long originally, which is pretty wild. Obviously, it was cut down half of that to 2 hours, and all the deleted scenes were supposedly lost, but they're on on the DVD now. Excuse me. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
I hit the mute button and it doesn't mute it.
Yeah. I
It's
guess
weird.
not.
Like here, we can cut this, but I'll hit the mute button. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
What the fuck? That's weird. I don't know. Yeah. So the movie was apparently a lot longer. All the deleted scenes are on the special edition Blu-ray, which would be pretty interesting to see that, and the original ending where Dorothy commits suicide, which is pretty fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I thought when watching it that Jeffrey deducing that Don and Donnie, her husband and son, were like kidnapped, and she was like forced into this, crazy relationship with Frank, and that's what he has over her. I thought that was like kind of made up in his head at first, but then the ending, shows that, and it's like, because you don't see the kid until the last shot. You don't see Donnie, so I found that pretty interesting that they saved that for like the last shot. But like you said, it's pretty interesting having that contrasting happy ending with her.
Yeah, and like the like I said before, like that I think is one of the most important parts of the happy ending, is that Dorothy actually gets reunited with her son, even though the husband got his like head blown off or something.
He got shot in the head.
The apartment. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there's I mean, we touched on the violence a little bit earlier, but the ending is where you get most of the like bloody violence.
Yeah.
Even though really the only violent act you see is Frank's death, but you kind of walk in with Jeffrey on this like grotesque scene of
the
like,
yellow man standing
torture
up, just
and whatever the fuck happened to that guy, because his like brain is exposed and like he's just like standing there bleeding out, like
very weird, very interesting.
Which I guess exposed brain is also a David Lynch staple, that he just loves to do that in his
know that.
work. So yeah. But yeah, I mean that that end sequence is super interesting, and like really, I think Dennis Hopper does a great job of selling the like monstrosity and stuff as he kind of like clears the apartment looking for Jeffrey. And then, like, Jeffrey has to leave the safety of the closet to get the detective's gun and then go back in there and, basically Frank zeroes in on the closet as the last place that he could be hiding.
Yeah.
Then, he blows the back of his head out. A giant revolver.
I like that scene. Yeah, I like that scene. That scene's pretty wild. It also kind of reminds me, the inverse of that is in Burn After Reading. I don't know if you ever seen that Coen Brothers movie. I won't say anything about that. I don't want to spoil that for people who haven't watched, because that's a pretty awesome part to experience. Which I kind of did just spoil it. But
but yeah, that final sequence is super interesting, because Frank has Jeffrey exactly basically like dead to rights. Instead of just shooting up the closet, which he could have done, he takes like 10 huffs out of the gas mask and like gives Jeffrey the opportunity to blow him away. I think, which is like, I think very on point for Frank's character, that he's like so maniacal that he's going to take the time to get high rather than, you know, do what he's there to do, which is kill like the only person that really knows what's going on. So yeah, I think it's like, that's probably a good way to segue into like the script writing and stuff, because it like everything is just very well crafted. From a dialogue standpoint and from like the like screenplay aspect.
Yeah, this movie only got nominated for 1 Oscar, and it's for directing, which is interesting. And that's kind of rare when a movie only gets 1 nomination for that of all nominations.
Yeah.
It's like really rare. But yeah, the screenwriting's great. Again, it's really weird. It's, you know, like I said, the secondary characters and how they talk, and you know, like Sandy's line of like, I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Yeah.
It's in like, that's a great line. And it kind of almost like is his character, Jeffrey's character, like he's both technically.
Yeah, his character is super interesting, because there's even a point where, well, Jeffrey's in the backseat of Frank's car when they pull off into like that random like lumber yard or whatever the fuck, like, and Frank turns around and looks at him from the front seat and says, "You and me are the same," or something like that. And it's very brief, and it's almost hard to hear over some of the chaos in the car. But I thought that was a super cool addition. And like throughout the movie, Jeffrey's kind of struggling between the like morally good, kind of idyllic suburban environment that he lives in and like that he wants to be a part of, and this like dark underbelly that he's like enamored and obsessed with. And like you even see when he starts abusing Dorothy. And like that's I think he, you know, realizes that that's wrong, and he's that's why I think he kind of turns to Sandy, who's the
moral compass of the movie, basically.
Like, she's like the pure, like idyllic kind of like moral true north or compass of his life, and kind of leads him back towards that end of the spectrum. But yeah, I always think it's cool when you have a character that's confronted with like that dichotomy, and the villain is like reflected in himself. You know, like Star Wars is a great example of that. And like, I mean, the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy all have that element. So yeah, it's a cool thematic element, and like, I don't know, helps like make it a little bit more relatable, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no one's ever one way or the other in a sense. You never. Yeah. Nobody's perfect. You know, it's hard to walk the straight line. You know.
Right, and like we said earlier, that's a hallmark of film noir. Yeah. Where the main character has some kind of like
flaw,
imperfection or flaw, like a vice, or you know, they're a corrupt detective and it comes back to haunt them, you know, or like whatever, you know. But yeah, that's it's a cool
plot device.
Yeah, plot device. Thank you.
We're here for each other, Jake. I got you. Yeah. Going back to the screenplay, I think there's two favorite like Frank lines in this movie to me, and it's like, Frank's like, "Hey, do you want to go for a ride?" Jeff's like, "No thanks." "No thanks? What does that mean?" "I don't want to go." "Go where?" "For a ride." "Oh, ride? Now that's a good idea."
Yeah.
So awesome. And then where he's just like, Jeffrey's like, "I'll have a Heineken," and Frank gets like pissed off, and he's like, "Heineken? Fuck that shit. Pabst Blue Ribbon."
Yeah.
Which Pabst Blue Ribbon kind of sucks, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to drink it like back in college here and there, but like, it's not that good.
No.
That's just me, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think that just points to also like how much of a degenerate Frank is.
Because he likes PBR.
Well, like, I mean, like Jeffrey's like this refined taste with like the imported German beer Heineken, and then Frank is like, no, give me like the cheapest, dirtiest bullshit that like you can that just gets you wasted. So,
That's funny. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's. I don't. Would you say it's a good movie?
Yes.
Okay.
I do. I think it's a really good movie. I think it is absolutely worth watching.
Yes.
Just so much of it is so well put together.
Yeah.
Like the two songs that are used predominantly in the movie are Blue Velvet, obviously, and Dorothy sings it most of the time that it's featured in the movie. But then the other one is the Roy Orbison song In Dreams, which just fits so well in the movie. Because it is this very like dreamy, like 50s early rock song, and like it's got this like I don't know, it's almost like a Spanish style kind of like march like beat and stuff, and like it's just very like ethereal sounding.
Yeah.
It just works so well, and like it's a love song, but like Frank kind of perverts it into this like I'm stalking you in your dreams kind of like monologue to Jeffrey, which I think was one of the coolest scenes in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of cool scenes. It's interesting. I mean, it's one of those movies we kind of talked about with After Hours with our last podcast about you have to let it sit. It has to digest. It has to marinate with you a little bit. And again, that's why, I mean, I've talked about this before. It's like, that's why I like this podcast, this medium, is we can talk about it together as film fans and, fans of the 80s movies, and really kind of pick it apart and digest it even more. And that's really what I like. And again, this whole goal is to get people to watch this movie and then listen to our thoughts on it, if and see what we have to say.
Yeah,
if they want to.
Yeah, I mean, to sum up, if you haven't watched the movie, you should watch it. Be warned that it is intense,
graphic,
and graphic, but it's earned quite a cult status, but I think it's deserving of even beyond that. It's listed regularly on lists of like the greatest films in American history, greatest films of the 80s. Like Frank is listed on lots of like best villains of all time lists. So like there's a lot in this movie that's particularly groundbreaking and just masterful. So from a pure like cinematic enthusiast kind of standpoint, it's absolutely worth watching, and getting to experience it. Now again, I don't know if I'll ever watch it for a second time, but I'm glad I watched it. It makes me want to watch his other movies a lot. and rewatch Twin Peaks.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to watch more of his movies. He is an auteur for sure. I mean, he is a filmmaker. He's a divisive filmmaker, and his movies aren't, for the weary-hearted. And he does something different with film, and it's interesting to see his take and how he makes these movies, and it makes you think. It makes you want to dissect it, like we were talking about, and that's really cool. And I like those type of films. It's definitely a contrast to our Running Man movie that we did earlier this month, and I'm glad we did it. I'm definitely looking forward to our drastic change next week.
Like the most drastic change possible.
So drastic. Harry and the Hendersons, which is... You've never seen it, right, Jake?
No.
Okay, so you haven't seen any of these movies, basically.
Well, I basically know what happens in Harry and the Hendersons, but I've never seen it.
Yeah, so we'll be in it for definitely a different style of podcast next week.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I was excited for this month. We have I've enjoyed this month so far, and I hope our listeners have as well. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next one.
Same.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Yep. See you.